Hello and welcome to the Business Talk podcast. I'm your host Deepak. Let's extend a warm welcome to Dr. Katia Velkas as she joins us on our podcast. Dr. Katia is a multifaceted professional renowned as a reinvention coach, author, speaker, and meditation teacher. Originally from Cameroon, Central Africa, she was raised in Greece and has spent over 25 years as an expat living and working across the United States and various European countries. Currently, she resides in Zurich, Switzerland, bringing her diverse cultural and professional experiences to her work in empowering individuals to embrace transformation and personal growth. She is a distinguished researcher and policy analyst, holding a master's degree from Harvard University and a PhD from the Rand Corporation. In her previous career, she served as a security and defense analyst, contributing her expertise across the United States and Europe. In this episode, Dr. Katia offers profound insights from her recent book, Uncaged, A Good Girl's Journey to Reinvention. Dr. Katia, it is an honor and privilege to have you join us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Deepak. I'm excited to have a conversation with you.
Thank you. Dr. Katia, your story is deeply personal and transformative. Can you share the pivotal moment when you realized you were living in a self-imposed cage and what motivated you to break free?
Right. So there was a pivotal moment, and it is at the beginning of the book. So I don't want to give it away, but what I want to say, it was more an acknowledgement and an acceptance than it was a realization. I think I had known for a while. The signs were there, but I wasn't acknowledging. And so there was a turning point where I realized I couldn't deny it anymore. And also, at that moment, I realized I had to act. And the reason I had to do something was that I realized that I didn't have agency or full agency over my life anymore. And I was starting to lose myself. And that was the scariest part, I think, realizing that, oh, okay, if I don't do something now, I'm so disconnected from who I really was, that this is gonna get worse. And in the end, I won't even know who I am. So so I guess you could call that a pivotal moment. It was an incident that really shook me, and it made me it threw me into a whole self-reflection process that made me realize the extent of the cage, actually. So, all the things I was kind of suspecting, but then it really became very clear to me after that.
Thank you. Growing up in a traditional Greek family, societal expectations must have shaped much of your early life. How did these cultural norms influence your identity, and how did you begin to redefine what it means to be a good girl?
Yeah. First of all, I stopped using good girl. To be clear, I didn't redefine it. I redefined myself, but not the good girl anymore, right? So, like, I mean, first, it's important to define what we mean by good girl. And for me, at its core, there's different elements. So one is, what I like to call pathological people pleasing. You put others' needs ahead of your own the whole time. You aim for acceptance and approval. There's a lot of self-sacrifice involved. Again, putting others, prioritizing others' needs is kind of a must to be a good girl. There is following the prescribed path, which is what's right for you or what's appropriate, what others define again. And then there's also an element of, feeling guilty or selfish if you even consider prioritizing yourself. So those emotions are part of it. And those labels, you receive, you're called selfish if you don't put others ahead of you. There's other elements like, fulfilling expectations or avoiding conflict, or in my case, there was a lot around pursuing excellence and checking all the boxes, right? So these norms and these beliefs really shaped my choices for a very long time. I fulfilled all the expectations, including my own, which were very high. I had a hard time disappointing people. That's a people pleasing. There came a moment when I realized that if you asked me what I really wanted to do in my life, I had no idea, because I had never asked myself that, and nobody had asked me as well. So, I now also felt, again, when I started moving away from that paradigm, there was a lot of guilt that came with it. Now, redefining my identity, not the term good girl, was a lot around accepting that, I would be disappointing people and that was okay, and that didn't make me a bad person or a selfish person. It was about learning to set boundaries around my choices, around my well-being, my needs, um, and also embracing the idea that prioritizing myself was not selfish. It was kind of normal and essential even. Um, and also part of like moving away from that identity was defining what was important to me, what were my values, what was, at the core of what's important to me, and then deciding that I would align my life with those values, not with what I was getting fed from the outside in terms of expectations or beliefs about what's right and all that. And I think that last part is at the core of breaking free. It's deciding, okay, now I'm going to do what's right for me. Maybe sometimes it will align with what other people think, and sometimes it won't, and that's okay. But that's what feels right. So yeah, hope that answers.
Yeah. You speak about labels like selfish and the emotional baggage from childhood. How did you confront these false labels, and what advice would you give to others struggling with similar self perceptions?
Yeah, so this was a tough one because a lot of these labels we carry from really early on in life, and we internalize them, we embrace them. They feel like they're part of us, and so for me in the beginning, it felt almost unthinkable to start rejecting a label that I had owned. It's like and I was called selfish a lot as when I was younger because I wouldn't always put others' needs ahead of my own, right? So and for most of my adult life, I was in that cage, and I had embraced those labels. Now, going through a crisis, just like I did with my marriage, which is in the book, it forced me to re-examine those labels and to question that. And how I did that is I started asking myself, are these things about me really true? Am I really selfish? And or is it more about other people than it is about me? Is it more about their own kind of beliefs? So questioning and challenging those labels is one part. The other part is rewriting the story, right? Like I said, taking care of yourself, is it selfish really? No, like it's kind of shifting that belief, and also defining what really matters to me. Again, I come back to the values, and I think I'll probably come back to that, through this episode, because that allowed me to recognize where it was that I wasn't honoring those values, why things were feeling off, why those labels didn't make any sense, and what I wanted to choose instead, like the direction I wanted to go. So if I had to give advice to somebody who's feeling stuck right now, it would be, um, when you're feeling stuck, notice what stories go through your mind. What are the beliefs you're carrying, and ask yourself, are these my stories? Are these my beliefs? Are they coming from are they external? And do I really believe in them? And so, whose are the voices that you are hearing here? Is it your voice or is it somebody else's? And I think that starts you down the road of then choosing, okay, what do I want to believe instead? What is more empowering? What serves me better than these stories? In most cases, they're not your stories. So
Uh, Dr. Katia, the book captures moment of heartbreak, like your divorce and the loss of your father. How does this experience reshape your understanding of resilience and love?
so I believe that our biggest lessons come from moments of struggle, right? Those are the ones that really push us to our limits. They also allow us to see, first of all, what we're capable of. So they expand our perception of ourselves. So, for example, my divorce showed me that I had the courage to walk away from a situation that no longer served me. but in fact undermined my sense of well-being and also my sense of identity. That I had the strength to choose myself in that case. I didn't know that until I did it, right? So through situations like that, we also, we build our confidence because we see, oh, I can do this. Okay, let me move on to the next choice. Let me move on to the next choice. So our decisions, our choices, the confidence that builds up progressively, right? Um, Another thing I learned, and I think you learned from very challenging situations, is that we don't have control over everything in our lives, right? There's things that are going to happen, but we do have absolute control on how we respond on, and there are other things that we have a choice about, and it's about looking for those areas where we do have a choice and focusing on those and really putting our energy there because the other stuff we can't control. um, and the final thing, that I learned through these really challenging situations is that they didn't break me. So, when you watch yourself emerge on the other side, go through a really difficult experience and emerge on the other side, that's a huge lesson for the future. You learn not to fear being vulnerable because you know that you're not going to break. You know that you're resilient. You know that you're going to come out of the other side. So, the way I see resilience, it doesn't mean you're not affected by anything. It just means you allow yourself to feel, you feel the emotions, you feel, all the struggle, but you also, grow stronger on the other side because you learn how to heal. You learn how to allow yourself to heal as well. So, yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Risk taking plays a central role in your journey, from riding away on a Harley to making life altering decisions. What role does risk play in personal reinvention, and how can someone afraid of change begin to embrace it?
So there is the mindless risk, which is more reactive, like going, that Harley ride was my missed teenage rebellion that I was catching up on. And there's, besides mindless risk, there's also intentional risk. And you have to take some of the intentional risks if you want to reinvent yourself. You have to take some sort of leap away from what's familiar and in order to build something new, right? So otherwise it doesn't work. So maybe the risk is more practical. I don't know, leaving a job or leaving a marriage, even when you don't have a very clear plan. Maybe it's emotional, like facing your fears around, uncertainty or change, like you said, or around people's reaction to you changing things. Maybe it's both, right? Maybe it's both kinds of risk, both practical and emotional, usually. But risk is essential because it's what takes you from where you are to where you want to be, that leap. And the thing I think that helps for somebody who is kind of daunted by this idea of taking risk is that you don't have to do everything at once, right? You don't have to take a massive leap. People sometimes say, oh, reinvention is like, a life-changing decision. No, it's actually a set of small steps. You can, just take one step at a time. You can make one choice that feels slightly uncomfortable, slightly outside your comfort zone, and then, once you've made that, then move on to the next choice, and then the next, and then they build up. Like I said, they build your confidence, and over time they build into like deep transformation. But it's not one big bang and you reinvent yourself. So change can happen gradually, and it actually works really well with reinvention. So in that way, reframing risk instead of something that's big and scary into possibility, into like building something from little steps. I think that's a way to approach reinvention.
Very insightful, Dr. Katia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Self-acceptance is recurring theme in Uncaged. So what steps did you take to reconnect with your playful, adventurous essence? And how did this transformation impact your relationships and career?
Yeah, so in my case, reinvention or reconnecting with myself was going back to who I was when I was 4 years old, which was the time when I started to enter the cage. And there was, like you said, there was a lot of playfulness, a lot of cheekiness, a lot of adventurousness there. So I decided there were things that happened, obviously, that made me take that decision. But I decided to bring more of these qualities into my life and especially my work, because up to then I didn't think they had a place there. Being playful and being a professional, it's not exactly the first thing you associate, with each other, with being professional. But there are ways to introduce it, and so that was one thing, trying to see, okay, where can I bring more of myself without feeling like this was a bad thing. I had to shift my mindset around that. I also gave myself permission to make mistakes and not necessarily beat myself up for them, but see them as learning opportunities. That's another part of self-acceptance and self-compassion. I allowed myself, and that was a really difficult one because I was a perfectionist, was to show up imperfectly and be okay with that, and still do, not necessarily do 150%, but sometimes maybe 80% was okay, right? So that was another shift. Um, I brought more humor into my life, especially when I made mistakes. And you asked how this affected my relationships and career. I think as a professional, it made me more authentic. Um, and that was not only liberating for me, but it also allowed me to build a stronger, more solid sense of trust, and to build stronger relationships around this trust and authenticity with my clients. And the same happened with my relationships. When you're more yourself, when you show up more authentically, that always has a positive impact in the kind of connection you can create with the other person. So, and it's just more fun to just be more playful. I'm really enjoying it now, and so it's really changed my life
Yeah.
in
Thank you.
many ways.
Dr. Katia, what was the most challenging part of revisiting your past while writing Uncaged? And what did you learn about yourself through the process?
So I like to say that writing memoir is like intense therapy, because there's a lot of emotion, and also there's a lot of learning. So the hardest part for me was reliving some of the memories that were very painful. There were moments of loss, and shame and self-doubt. So the death of my father was a really tough one to write, and that I had to take breaks when I was writing, because it was very hard to just keep writing and processing at the same time. Going through the divorce, especially anything that had to do with my children, that was also really, really painful emotionally, and going through the experience again, the guilt, the shame, the uncertainty, and the fear that was involved in that. So those were the hardest parts. Of course, writing is also a wonderful way of processing emotions and healing. And so by reliving and confronting these moments, they start to lose their power over you, right? And also they allow you to draw lessons about yourself. So I learned a lot about resilience and perseverance, but I also learned, actually, I had insights about myself that I did not know when I was starting to write the memoir. And the ending that is now in the book is not what I thought initially. It's not how I thought I would end the book. So there were some pretty big realizations that came through the writing, and that even I didn't expect that. So it was fascinating.
Yeah. You speak of creating home and belonging wherever we find ourselves. So, what does home mean to you now? And how has this definition evolved over time?
So the concept of home is one of my favorite subjects. I write extensively about that in my first book, A Great Move. And there I talk about how one's concept of home influences how we make moves, how we make these transitions, and how we settle into a new place. So I talk about three different concepts. One is home as place, home as a feeling, and home as people. And also talk about, the fact that the more we move around, the less home becomes about a particular place, like a geography, and the more it is about the other two, like a feeling and a connection to people. So, I mean, the same is true for me. I started with, my home being Greece because my parents are Greek and I grew up there. Um, but since I've been moving for now, this year it will be 30 years actually that I've left Greece. It's become much more around people, like my family, my tribe, all the people I have around the world who I feel close to, who are who understand me and support me. And it's also a feeling, a sense of belonging, a sense of familiarity, a sense of connection that I have when I'm somewhere. There is there's the two other elements to home that are important here. One is, home within, learning to be at peace and feeling grounded in yourself. And I think that's huge, especially when you're moving around so much, to have that sense of home wherever you are. And the second part I wanted to say, yes, it's not about geography, but there can be elements of landscape that are part of home. So in my case, I feel at home when I'm close to water. Maybe it's the Mediterranean Sea where I grew up, but maybe it's the Atlantic Ocean, maybe it's the Lake Zurich, like where I live right now. Being close to water really makes me feel like I'm home. So sorry, many different dimensions, but just the conclusion or the point I want to make is home, progressively becomes less about one specific location, and it becomes more around relationships and people and the sense of belonging.
Yeah. Many readers may resonate with your story, but struggle to take the first step towards change. So, what practical advice would you give to someone who feels stuck in a life that doesn't reflect their true self?
So a few things. I will start with things that may block you from doing something. And one is thinking, oh, it's too late for me, or I'm too old for this. And that's just not true. It's never too late to rewrite your story, right? A lot of people have reinvented themselves in their 40s or 50s or 60s. There's a lot of examples out there. Do a little research and you'll see that no, it's never too late. The other thing I already talked about, a misconception, is that it has to be one big leap. And that's also not true. Small steps. You don't have to overhaul your life overnight. You can start one choice at a time. So, start by, okay, what's one small thing I can do? But before you go there, I would say that what really helped me and what really launched me into this journey was sitting down and reflecting on my values. And values are what is important to us. And values are pretty deep, and usually they don't change. They're pretty fundamental. They're what makes things feel right or feel off, right? When we don't honor them versus when we do. So start with what's important to you, and you already gain a lot of understanding about what it is that keeps you stuck, I suspect, and also what may be missing, what may be misaligned, what you may need to adjust to move forward. So understanding why you're stuck and where you're stuck, that's going to help. And then once you do that, then there's a big question, which is, what do I really want now? What's really important for me to have moving forward? Big question, ponder that. And then what's the smallest possible step I can take today? It can be tiny, but like I said, it just gets you started. You just need to get your foot in the door, make that first choice, and then make the next one, and then make the next one. Just small steps, right? That's, if something stays from this whole conversation, it's like it happens one small step at a time, reinvention. And there's things that help. There's, journaling really helps. Finding support, like having a support network of people who understand you, really helps. Working with a coach, I have to say, it kind of speeds up the process because a lot of these, this work of understanding, what are the beliefs you're carrying, they're not yours. Sometimes these things are not fully conscious, and it helps to have somebody point them out to you. It helps to have somebody guide you. So that helped me as well. But again, if there's like a few steps you can take right now on your own, it's understanding your values and asking yourself, what do I really want? And third, what's one small step I can take in that direction? And staying stuck has to be more painful than the fear of moving forward, right? It's like that's kind of the imbalance that needs to happen. When staying stuck becomes so painful, you have to do something about it, then that's how you start.
Dr. Katia, my last question. Your
Mhm.
journey spans diverse landscapes, from Switzerland to Greece and beyond. So, how does these physical locations influence your internal journey of self-discovery and reinvention?
So it's not the physical location is as much as it is my experience living there and how I felt living there. So, for example, I think a big part of this, well, the launch of my reinvention start, was in Vienna because I was just having a really hard time there. And like I said, struggle lessons, that's where our biggest lessons come from. So Vienna forced me to confront my mindset, to confront the fact that I was feeling like a victim, and to decide to shift that and take charge of my life and start owning my choices. So it was more the experience of being there. I lived in Los Angeles, and it was all about freedom and being myself and feeling alive, and that informed me about the things that I needed to have in my life moving forward in my new, kind of my reinvented version. Greece, my life in Greece connected me to my roots and my kind of my early rebellion, which was also very informative for moving forward. And finally, Switzerland gave me this stability. I think feeling grounded and feeling settled there allowed me to make all the changes I wanted in my life because I had a kind of a secure base there. So yeah, I guess every location kind of brought a little part of me and a little part of my identity into the whole reinvention process. I hadn't thought of that, by the way. Thank you for making me reflect on that.
Yeah. Wrap up this episode, we thank you, Dr. Katia, for sharing her incredible journey and transformative insights. Her story spanning continents and careers offers inspiration to anyone seeking reinvention and personal growth. We are grateful for the profound wisdom she has shared from her book, Uncaged, A Good Girl's Journey to Reinvention, and for her contribution as a coach, researcher, and meditation teacher. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Katia, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Stay inspired, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, Deepak. It's been a pleasure.